All right, so I wasn't going to go there yet, but you brought it up, so let's talk about that. So that is where, like, so that's where the rubber meets the road, and that's where, like, fundamentally, we've got the window dressing on the front side, and then we've got the ability to meet the requirements on the backside to service these DSARs, and that piece in the middle, right? That's the data mapping. Explain to someone what what you, and you can take it one of two ways. We do data maps, so I know how we do them. But how would you describe a data map, and or how would you describe a record of processing activities? And I'm assuming that, from your perspective, that would be like a GDPR, was it Article 30
That's
report?
right.
Yeah. Okay. So can you talk a little bit about that from your perspective? And by the way, I'm gonna just lean back and grab this bottle.
You need a top up. This is getting heavy now, right?
You need a top off on your prosecco, or are you okay? Is that an IV? You're looking at me like you don't know what an IV is.
I have no idea.
Oh, is that just the IV intravenous? I was.
Oh, joking. Okay, I see.
I was joking that you were so hardcore that you were IV in your.
No, not at all.
All right.
So I am going to have another sip of my drink, because I think you need this when you start to talk ROPAs and data mapping, right?
I got to be honest with you. I think most people need that when they talk with me. I know my poor wife. I mean, I come in the house, she goes and grabs a glass of wine because it requires alcohol, I believe. So it's not unusual. Yeah, I think it's me. I really do. All right, so let's get to this ROPA data mapping. If you kind of talk people through, it's a term that they hear a lot about, but I don't think most people really understand it.
Yeah, so I guess, a ROPA really is that sort of view of the information that you have within your organization, the basis for which you hold that information and process that information, the third parties to which with which you might share that information, the security standards that you've applied to the information, and also, where required, the risk assessment in terms of any impact that the processing might have on an individual. So you may have a data protection impact assessment that you then feed into your ROPA. Once you're at that stage, you know that you've got pretty good understanding of your information sort of universe and infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I'm simplifying it a lot because essentially
doesn't sound simple.
it's essentially, how do you get that view? How do you get that view? Right. And you may have to do this in a sort of iterative way. Mm-hmm. One way of getting that view is obviously speaking to individuals who have functional responsibility for the data. Mm-hmm. And there is going to be a degree of interviewing, recording, documenting what happens within your organization. Mm-hmm. But then that also has to be validated, right? And normally the way in which you validate what's the information that you've gathered through that sort of mapping process is by carrying out a more in-depth review using often technology, mm-hmm. a more in-depth review of the systems and the data that you hold within the systems, mm-hmm. of your organization. And that's where sort of technical experts such as yourself, John, will come in and do that sort of data mapping, shadow IT review, mm-hmm. get deep into the sort of the systems and the pipes to ensure that whatever is being said at the sort of the sort of higher end is accurate. Because you might speak with a marketing team who says, right, yeah, we have these systems, we share data with these third parties, and that's it.
Gotcha.
But then you may go into your in-depth review, you find that there are all these cookies that you have on your systems, there are all these applications that individuals have downloaded and are using, and they haven't been captured because perhaps they didn't know, the individuals at the front end and the functional teams weren't aware of the extent of data used within the organization.
Yeah, so you'd be surprised. So I agree with you. I think the technical tools are interesting because that can. So the way I look at a data map, and tell me if you disagree. The way I look at a data map is you are trying to tie the individual discrete elements of personal information And we should really talk about how the definition of personal information has changed completely in a second as well. So put a pin in that one and don't let me forget that. But how each of the individual components of personal information, right, flow into your organization, right? What are the processing activities that act on those? And then what are the assets, the systems, the applications, the databases, the SaaS tools that store that information? Because that's going to give me that ability to, that's the map of personal information to the people that touch it and the activities that act on it to the systems that store it. That gives me that ability to service a data subject access request. What information do you have? Where did it come from? My data map tells me that, correct?
Indeed. And not just for subject access requests, actually. It's something that some of the regulators will proactively ask for.
Yes, I agree.
Right?
I agree. My internal use for that is that tells me where, that tells me where my data is and why it's there and who put it there.
Indeed.
Okay.
And there may be some other strategic benefits as well of having that overview. Completely. Right, for organizations, there's a sort of realization, oh, we do that, is that something that we should continue doing or something that we should stop doing, or maybe there's a better way of processing this information.
Yeah, and I think you talked about using like technology to validate that and catch the exceptions or what people don't realize is happening. I would argue that actually sometimes the processing interviews do the same thing in a way that we can't catch with technology. Because, when you think about it, if I'm scanning with technology, I'm largely living on their infrastructure. But if they're putting a bunch of things up into the cloud, right, I have no way of knowing, or if they're sending data to a third party. So, great.
So you need both. You absolutely.
Yeah, and to your sense, the iterative nature of it, like we were doing interviews once with a law firm, and they were processing these cases, and we're going to genericize it. And what happened is that we were the CIO of the organization was shocked. He sat in on the interviews when this person said, "Then we package all the information up and we send it to X," and the person, and he's like, "I don't know who that is." Oh, it's this. It's an offshore organization in India that and so they're sending inordinate amounts of personal information. How long has that been going on? About 3.5 years.
Yeah. So
I think to your point, yeah, those conversations are absolutely critical. The validation on the technology side, but you'll find an amazing number of things that you can't pick up with technology through the interviews. So I'm more of a fan, although I'm a technologist, I'm more of a fan of the interviews because I think that's where you're going to really. I think you have to do interviews. Some people try to do it just with technology and just show me every place in a database or every place in a file share that I can find personal information, and now I know where everything is. No.
Yeah, and actually, importantly, is having an infrastructure and process in place to keep that ROPA evergreen.
Oh.
Right?
Listen, from your lips to God's ears, but that, I mean, getting to an initial ROPA is hard enough. Now putting, like you said, putting something in place that would, keep that updated dynamically, that is definitely aspirational, I think, in most organizations.
But it's so necessary, and that's where your governance infrastructure is so important in terms of, right, who are your foot soldiers who have responsibility for this, right, across your different functions, and how are they empowered and trained to understand exactly what needs to be done here?
Right. Yeah, listen, I think you're on your side of the pond. I think you guys are ahead of us by a bit. So I would say here, we're still. So many people looked at GDPR and said, we're pretty far away from them. And, we once overthrew the king over there anyway. So he has to say over here. I didn't mean to bring that up. I mean, I'm not gloating or anything like that. But CCPA changed, I think, people's opinion of privacy and GDPR as well. At the same time, I think, I got to do CCPA, so I might as well. So I think we're behind the times relative to most of the folks over in the EU. So I do think that we're still getting to initial ROPA, and I think for many of our orgs, not getting to a point where our ROPAs are dynamically updated.